The building always came to life long before the employees arrived, long before the coffee machines clicked on, long before the glass doors opened, and long before the busy footsteps filled the halls. In those quiet early hours, when the city outside was still yawning awake, a single father walked inside with a slow, steady pace. His uniform was simple, the kind people rarely noticed, and the badge on his chest didn't hold any title that impressed others. But he carried something, far heavier than the tools in his cart. He carried the weight of raising a child alone, of trying to keep a roof over her head, and of trying to make it through each day with dignity. Most people did not know much about him. They saw him with his mop and bucket, wiping down the long floors, polishing the railings, and emptying the bins one floor at a time. Some nodded politely, some walked past him as if he were part of the walls, and some barely looked up from their phones. He didn't take offense. Life had taught him not to expect attention from others. It had also taught him that people often overlooked the ones who worked quietly in the corners. He had been working in this building for a few years, arriving before sunrise and leaving when most people had already forgotten their long meetings. And tiring shifts, his routine never changed. He cleaned, he fixed whatever was broken, and he made sure the place looked fresh for the day ahead. The job wasn't easy, but it was honest work. It paid enough to keep food on the table for his young daughter and cover the bills, even if barely. Every morning, he walked through the empty hallways humming softly to himself. The tune was always the same an old melody he remembered from years ago, before life became complicated, before responsibilities replaced dreams, before he became a single parent trying to do everything alone. There was a time when he lived for music, a time when he would sit for hours at a piano, his fingers dancing across the keys as if they belonged there. Music had once been his escape, his passion and his quiet joy. But life doesn't always allow people to hold on to their passions. When he became a father, and later when he lost the support he once had, music slowly drifted away from him. The piano he loved was sold, long before his daughter learned her first words. Still, sometimes when the building was completely silent, he would pause for a moment near the old grand piano kept on the top floor. The company usually brought it out only for events, yet it stayed covered most of the year. He liked to look at it whenever he passed by, almost like greeting an old friend he was no longer allowed to visit. He never touched it, though. He didn't feel like someone in his position had the right, and he didn't want anyone to think he was neglecting his work. He never told anyone about his past with music. It felt unnecessary, almost like talking about a different life he no longer lived. People saw him as the janitor, the man who made the floors shine and fixed flickering lights. Not as someone who once had a talent worth mentioning, and he accepted that. His daughter was the only person who knew he used to play, and even she had never heard him perform. She would ask sometimes, in her small, innocent voice, why he didn't play anymore. He always smiled gently and said, "Maybe one day." The early shift meant he didn't get much sleep, but he preferred it that way. He could bring his daughter to school, pick her up in the afternoon, help with homework, and tuck her into bed. At a decent hour, he built his life around her needs. He often reminded himself that everything he did, every tiring day, every long shift was for her. She was his reason to keep going. While he worked, he often thought about how different things could have been. Sometimes he imagined a small apartment filled with music instead of silence, or imagined sitting at a piano with his daughter beside him, her eyes full of curiosity as she asked to learn a melody. But life rarely went according to dreams. He accepted his reality, even if a part of him stayed quietly connected to the world. He once loved Dot at the office building. The employees were preparing for an important week. The company had a big event coming up, and everyone was rushing to meet deadlines, finalize presentations, and decorate the central hall. This event happened only once a year, and it always brought excitement and stress into the building. From his spot in the corner, he watched them setting up lights, arranging flowers, and discussing the seating plan. A shiny grand piano had been placed in the main hall, completely uncovered, polished, and beautiful. The instrument caught everyone's attention, even his. It gleamed under the soft lights, looking like the kind of piano people played on big stages. One of the employees mentioned that a well-known pianist had been invited to perform during the event. The name wasn't familiar to him, but the idea of a musician filling the hall with music stirred something deep inside him. He kept working, trying not to get distracted by the piano. He mopped the floor near it, taking extra care, almost as if afraid he might disturb the instrument. He moved quietly, the same way someone might walk around a sleeping child, careful, respectful, and gentle. The employees continued to decorate and rehearse their parts. Some laughed loudly, some were stuck in arguments about tiny details, and some simply watched the piano with a mix of admiration and excitement. Music had a way of pulling people in, even when they didn't understand it. As he worked, a few employees walked past him without noticing the tired look in his eyes, or the careful way he avoided stepping too close to the piano. He didn't mind. His job was not about being seen, but the piano, its presence, stirred memories inside him. Memories of sitting on a wooden bench in a dim room, practicing scales until his hands hurt. Memories of performing at a small community event when he was younger. Memories of feeling alive, even when everything else around him felt uncertain. He finished his tasks quietly, wiping dust off tables, straightening chairs, and checking the equipment. His hands were rough from years of work, far from the hands he once had, the hands that moved gracefully across keys. But even now, sometimes when he stretched his fingers, he felt a small memory of what they used to do. As the hours passed, the building grew louder. More employees arrived, more conversations filled the air, and the hall became busy and bright. Nobody knew what was happening inside the janitor's chest. Nobody sensed the quiet ache in him as he walked past the piano again. His daughter called him during his short break, her voice cheerful as always. She talked about school, about a new class activity, and about how she missed him already, even though they had seen each other just that morning. Their conversations were the only moments in the day when he felt lighter. After the call, he returned to work. A few employees smiled at him, but only out of habit. He returned the smile politely. He didn't expect anything more. By midday, the preparations were almost done. The piano stood right in the center of the hall now, impossible to ignore. People kept circling it, admiring it, making jokes, and testing the sound of the keys, even though they didn't know how to play. He watched silently from the side as someone pressed a random key, laughing when the note came out sharp and loud. Another employee joked about how anyone could play something better than that. Their laughter echoed through the hall. He didn't join in. Instead, he continued his work with his head slightly lowered. But deep inside, a small spark flickered, one he tried to ignore. He wondered what it would feel like to play again, to place his hands on the smooth keys and feel the music rise inside him, to remember what it was like to express something without words. But he quickly shook the thought away. Dreams were a luxury he couldn't afford. He returned to his duties, but every time he passed the piano, he felt it drawing him in like a quiet whisper, a memory calling his name, a part of him that he had buried long ago. He didn't know it yet, but life was about to surprise him in a way he never imagined. The piano, the employees, the event, everything was quietly building toward a moment he didn't see coming, and that moment would change everything. The days leading up to the event were filled with a different kind of energy inside the building. People walked faster, spoke louder, and worked with a rush that made the halls feel more alive than usual. For most of the employees, It was just another annual event. But for the janitor, it was simply another week of work, another set of long hours, and another set of tasks to complete quietly in the background. He didn't complain. He never did. He moved through the busy hallways with calm steps, pushing his cart, carrying supplies, and making sure everything stayed clean despite the constant activity. The smell of fresh flowers mixed with the scent of polished wood and new decorations. It was the kind of environment that made people excited. But he only focused on what needed to be done. The grand piano was now fully uncovered, sitting in the center of the main hall like the heart of the event. Its surface was so shiny that the ceiling lights reflected off it. People kept stopping near it, whispering, teasing each other, and imagining how it would sound during the event. Even those who had no interest in music found themselves drawn to it. He tried not to stare at it too much. Every time he looked at the piano, something stirred inside him, something he had buried for years. He didn't want to awaken it. He couldn't afford to. His life was already full of responsibilities, and he didn't need old dreams coming back only to remind him of what he had lost. Still, it was hard to ignore, especially when the workers were rehearsing around it, adjusting microphones, testing the speakers, and practicing speeches from the small stage. The piano stood silently, waiting for the moment when the invited performer would fill the hall with music. As he swept the area near the stage, he overheard some of the employees talking about the performer. There was excitement in their voices as they mentioned how talented the pianist was supposed to be. Someone even said that the CEO had personally chosen the musician. That explained why everyone was taking the preparation so seriously. He continued his work carefully, not wanting to get in anyone's way. Every time someone needed help moving equipment or carrying extra chairs, he stepped in quietly. He didn't wait to be asked twice. Years of working in the background taught him to notice problems before they happened. But no matter how busy he tried to keep himself, the piano kept catching his attention. It stood right in the center of the hall like a reminder of the life he once imagined, a reminder of the dreams he left behind when he started a new chapter as a parent. Around midday, when the crowd had thinned out for lunch, a small group of employees remained in the hall. They were young, lively, and full of jokes. One of them sat on the piano bench, tapping random keys just to hear the sounds echo. The others laughed, teasing him about how he should play a song during the event. The janitor was mopping the floor, a few steps away, keeping his head down, trying not to listen. But their voices were loud enough to fill the space. "Come on," one of them said to her coworker. "Play something real, not those broken noises you're making." The man at the piano laughed, pressing another wrong key. "I'm trying. This thing is too fancy for me." Another coworker leaned against a table and said, "Well, anyone can do better than that." They all burst into laughter. The janitor kept sweeping. He didn't want to get involved. He didn't want attention. He only wanted to finish his tasks. But then one of the employees noticed him. "Hey," she called out with a playful smile. "You've been standing there for a while. You know how to play something?" He froze for a moment. His heart skipped a beat. He looked up slowly, unsure how to respond. Before he could say anything, another person laughed and said, "Yeah, right. Imagine if he jumps on the piano and surprises all of us." More laughter followed. It wasn't cruel, exactly. Just playful teasing. They didn't know anything about him. To them, he was simply the janitor, not someone who could possibly have a connection to music. He gave a polite smile and shook his head. "No, I'm just working," he said quietly. "Come on," the first person insisted. "Just try one key. What's the harm?" He hated moments like this. Moments when people put him in the spotlight without meaning to. He didn't like attention, not even positive attention. It made him feel small, as if they were expecting him to entertain them for a quick laugh. "I really can't," he said softly. "I have to finish this area before the next group comes in." The employees shrugged and turned back to each other, the teasing continuing among themselves. They weren't trying to be hurtful, but without knowing it, they had touched a part of him he tried so hard to hide. He finished cleaning the hall quietly, but as he walked past the piano again, he paused for just a second. His fingers twitched slightly at his side. It felt strange, like an old instinct trying to return. The piano was calling to him. Not with words, but with memories. He walked away. Before that feeling grew stronger. In the late afternoon, he moved to another floor to clean the offices. The quiet was a relief. It helped him breathe again. But even then, his mind kept replaying the moment when the young employees joked about him playing. He didn't blame them. They didn't know anything about him. They only saw the uniform, the cart, the mop. But deep inside, he felt something shift. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a mixture of longing and fear. Longing to touch the piano again. Fear of remembering how much he used to love it. After finishing the offices, he returned downstairs to help set up chairs for a rehearsal. The hall was busier now. People carried equipment, boxes, and cables everywhere. He joined in, lifting chairs and arranging them in rows. While he worked, the CEO walked through the hall with a few senior managers. They were examining decorations, checking the stage, and discussing the event schedule. The janitor stayed out of their way, keeping his head down as usual. He heard the CEO say, "Make sure the lighting is perfect for the performance. The music needs to fill the entire hall." The janitor felt a knot tighten in his chest. He wondered what kind of musician would be performing. He imagined someone confident, skilled, and talented, someone who hadn't been forced to give up their passion. After the managers left, he continued to work. But he couldn't stop thinking about what the CEO said. Music needs to fill the entire hall. The words echoed in his mind like a forgotten promise. The sun began to set, and the warm orange light filled the large windows of the hall. He always loved this hour. The building grew quieter, the rush faded, and the workers prepared to go home. It was the one time of day when he could breathe without interruptions. He leaned against his cart for a moment, stretching his back. His hands were tired. His feet ached. But he felt strangely awake. One of the workers from earlier walked by and said, "Hey, we were just joking, you know. Didn't mean to put you on the spot." He nodded kindly. "It's okay," he said. "I understand." The worker smiled and walked off. He wasn't upset. He just wasn't used to being noticed like that. Before leaving the hall for the day, he glanced at the piano once more. This time, he let himself look at it for longer. The way the last bit of sunlight touched the keys made the instrument look almost alive. He imagined sitting down just for a second. He imagined placing his hands on the keys. He imagined the feeling of the first note ringing through the hall. His chest tightened. He turned away and pushed his cart slowly toward the exit. He had no idea what was waiting for him the next day. No idea how quickly things were about to change. No idea that the piano he kept avoiding would soon pull him into a moment he could never forget. And he certainly had no idea that soon people who barely noticed him would look at him very differently. The morning of the rehearsal felt different. The moment he stepped into the building, there was a quiet heaviness in the air, the kind that comes before something unexpected. He couldn't explain it, but he felt it in his chest as he pushed his cart down the hallway. Maybe it was because of how close the event was. Maybe it was because the grand piano seemed to follow him in his thoughts. No matter how much he tried to ignore it. As usual, he arrived before most employees. The halls were still dim, the lights flickering on one by one as he walked. He liked the early hours. The silence gave him space to think. Even when his mind wandered into places, he didn't want it to go dot when he reached the main hall. The piano stood exactly where it had been the day before, shining under the ceiling lights. The cover had been removed again, and the black surface looked smooth enough to see reflections. He slowed down when he saw it, not because he wanted to, but because something inside him pulled him toward it. He tried to ignore the feeling and went straight to work. He checked the trash bins, wiped the tables, and made sure the floor was spotless. He kept himself busy, hoping the thoughts in his mind would quiet down. But the piano felt like a quiet whisper behind him, as if calling. To him more clearly than yesterday dot, by the time most employees arrived, he had already finished most of his tasks. People walked past him with coffee cups in hand, discussing details about the event, talking about the performers, and sharing excitement about the evening ahead. The invited pianist was supposed to rehearse that day, and everyone was eager too. Here a preview. The sound team came early to test microphones and speakers. A few managers had been pacing back and forth, reminding everyone how important the event was. The janitor kept his distance, staying out of the way. He didn't want anyone asking him to move equipment or help with something near the piano. Not today. Not when his mind already felt like it was full of old memories that had suddenly come alive. A little before noon, the sound of hurried footsteps filled the hall. 2 event coordinators ran toward the stage, whispering urgently to each other. Something was wrong. Even from across the room, he could see the tension on their faces. One of the managers joined him and asked, "What happened?" "The performer isn't coming," one of the coordinators said, breathless. "They had an emergency. They're not going to make it in time for rehearsal." The manager's expression shifted from confusion to frustration. "Did they say if they'll make it for the actual event?" "They're trying, but it doesn't look good," the other coordinator replied. For a moment, the hall fell into silence. The employees nearby exchanged worried glances. The event was just around the corner, and the piano performance was supposed to be one of the highlights. The manager rubbed his forehead and muttered, "The CEO is not going to be happy about this." The coordinator nodded. "We need a backup plan." He watched all of this from the side while wiping a table. He didn't want to listen, but the conversation was loud enough to reach him. He felt sympathy for them. Planning events wasn't easy. Dealing with last-minute problems was even harder. But what truly made his heart jump was the idea of the piano sitting there, unused, waiting for someone who might not arrive at all. He quickly shook the thought out of his head. It wasn't his place to even imagine stepping near the piano, let alone touching it. That was someone else's world. A few minutes later, employees started gathering near the piano, talking in low voices. "What are we going to do?" One of them asked. "We can't just leave it empty," another replied. "Maybe someone else can play something simple?" The group fell silent. Then someone turned and looked directly at him. That it wasn't the same teasing look as the day before. It wasn't mocking or playful. It was curious. "Hey," the employee said, walking toward him. "Yesterday you said you don't play, but do you know anything? Anything at all?" He felt every muscle in his body tense. His pulse quickened. His hands tightened around the cloth he was holding. He shook his head immediately. No, I don't." Another employee joined the first. "Are you sure? Even just a small piece? We don't need anything big." He backed away a little, feeling cornered. "I'm sorry, I really can't." They nodded slowly and walked away. But they didn't seem convinced. He walked toward the far side of the hall, pretending to sort through cleaning supplies, but his mind was racing. He hated lying, but what else could he do? Telling the truth meant opening a door he had kept closed for years, and he didn't want anyone to know how deeply he still cared about music. The employees continued talking in circles, trying to figure out what to do. Someone suggested playing recorded music instead, but another person said the CEO specifically wanted a live performance. Someone else mentioned asking a different musician from outside, but there wasn't enough time. The atmosphere grew tense. After a while, people drifted away, leaving only a few workers and the sound team in the hall. The janitor returned to cleaning, but his heart wasn't steady. It felt like someone had opened a part of his past and left it exposed. A few hours later, the hall became busier again as workers prepared for the final rehearsal of the evening. Chairs were being moved, decorations adjusted, and lighting tested. Again, he tried to stay focused on his tasks. He swept the floors, carried equipment, and checked the windows. But every moment, the piano stayed in his peripheral vision. At one point, he walked by it unintentionally. He didn't mean to stop, but his body paused on its own. His eyes fell on the keys, perfectly arranged, waiting. His fingers twitched. He imagined touching the keys. Even one note, just one. But he didn't dare. He took a step back, then another. But before he could fully walk away, a voice spoke behind him. "You should try it." He turned quickly, startled. A young employee stood by the stage, holding a stack of papers. She wasn't smiling teasingly like others had before. She looked sincere. He shook his head. "I can't." "It's okay if you don't want to," she said gently. "But the way you look at the piano, it's like you know it." He didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. The employee placed the papers on the stage and added, "If you ever want to try, even for a second, no one will laugh." He looked away and went back to his cart. But her words stayed with him. No one will laugh. Evening came. The hall was brighter than usual, with all the lights turned on for the rehearsal. The sound team tested the microphones again, and people moved around preparing for the final run-through, but the mood was still heavy. The missing performer left everyone anxious. He stayed on the side, ready to clean once rehearsal ended. His shift was almost done, and he just wanted to finish and go home to his daughter. Then something unexpected happened. One of the managers climbed onto the small stage and said loudly, "Okay, everyone, we're delaying rehearsal for a few minutes until we settle the music situation." The employees murmured among themselves. The manager continued, "If anyone here can play even a short piece, anything at all, please step forward. We just need a simple melody to test lighting and sound. Nothing complicated." He felt a cold wave wash over him. He looked at the floor, avoiding eye contact with everyone. A few people tried a key or two, but quickly shook their heads. Embarrassed, someone whispered, "We really need help." The janitor clenched his jaw. His heart was beating fast. He couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the tension in the room. Maybe it was the desperate tone in the manager's voice. Maybe it was the piano calling him again. Then, without warning, he heard his own voice speak. It was soft, almost shaky. I can try." The room fell silent. Everyone turned. He stood frozen, already regretting the words, but unable to take them back. His heart pounded in his ears. The manager blinked in surprise. "You can play?" He swallowed hard. "A little. Just something simple." The manager nodded quickly, relieved. "That's perfect. We just need something to test the sound." The employees stepped aside, creating a small path to the piano. He felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to move. Each step felt heavier than the last. He approached the piano slowly. When he reached the bench, he hesitated. His hands shook slightly as he pulled the bench out. He sat down. For a moment, he didn't move. The room was so quiet he could hear his own breathing. Then he lifted his hands toward the keys. His fingers hovered above them, trembling. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he pressed a key. A soft note filled the hall, It wasn't perfect, It wasn't strong, but it carried something real, something from deep inside him. He took a slow breath and pressed another key. Then another. His hands remembered more than he expected. The old muscle memory returned like a friend he thought he had lost. A simple melody formed, shaky at first, then steadier. People watched in silence. The janitor forgot where he was. He forgot the hall. He forgot the people. He forgot everything except the piano. His hands moved gently across the keys, playing a soft, peaceful tune. A tune he used to play long ago, before life became heavy. The workers stared, stunned. When he finally stopped, the last note lingered in the air. No one spoke. Then someone whispered, "That was beautiful." He stood up quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." But the manager cut him off. "No, that was exactly what we needed." The janitor stepped back, unsure how to react. He hadn't meant to reveal anything. He only wanted to help for a moment. But that small moment was about to open a door he never expected, and nothing in his life would be the same again. The next morning came quietly, with a soft gray sky and the smell of early rain in the air. At the small apartment, the janitor woke up before the alarm rang, as he often did. His body had learned the rhythm of early mornings long ago, back when life demanded that he work 2 jobs just to keep things steady. Even now, with only one job to worry about, he still couldn't stop his mind from waking him early. It wasn't stress today, though. It was something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. He sat up slowly, stretching his back until it made a small crack. His son was still sleeping, curled under the blanket with one arm over his face. The sight made him smile. The boy had stayed up late again, trying to finish a small drawing for school. He always said he wanted to make his dad proud, but the janitor already was. More than the boy could ever understand. He stood up silently, walked into the tiny kitchen, and started preparing breakfast. It wasn't anything fancy, just toast, eggs, and a bit of fruit, but he tried to make it look nice. He wanted the morning to start softly. He wanted the day to feel calm. But inside, he could feel a slow stirring. He had been asked to play the piano at the CEO's event. He still wasn't sure how that had happened. The night before flashed in his memory, the way people had stared, the silence that fell when he started playing, the look on the CEO's face when tears fell without warning. It didn't feel real. It felt like he had stepped into a dream, played a song, and walked back out before reality could close the door. He didn't know what the CEO wanted. He didn't know why he was being called the next morning. And he definitely didn't know why people were whispering in the hallways about him. He wasn't used to being noticed. He wasn't used to anyone caring about what he could do. Still, he tried not to think too much. The more he tried to understand, the stranger it all became. After breakfast, he woke his son gently. The boy blinked slowly, groggy but smiling when he smelled the food. They sat together at the small table, talking about school, homework, and little things. The janitor avoided mentioning the event. He didn't want to make himself look like someone different. He didn't want his son to think anything had changed, but the boy could sense something. "Dad," he said, chewing a piece of toast, "you're smiling too much." He laughed softly. "Is that so?" "Yes, your eyes look happy." The dad ruffled his hair. "Maybe it's just a good morning." The boy narrowed his eyes suspiciously, but he didn't push. He trusted his dad, and the janitor felt that trust settle warmly in his chest. After dropping his son off at school, he walked toward the company building. The streets were damp, reflecting soft light from the sky, and the air felt cooler than usual. As he approached, The tall glass structure. He felt the familiar sense of humility return. He was just a janitor. Just someone who swept floors and cleaned spillages. Someone people walked past without noticing. But today, everything felt different when he walked. Through the service entrance, he noticed two workers whispering. When they saw him, they stopped. Their eyes followed him for a moment before they turned away quickly, as if they had been caught staring. In the elevator, a few office staff stepped aside politely, something they had never done before. Someone even smiled at him. He didn't know what to do with that. He went straight to the storage room where he kept his cleaning supplies. He took a deep breath, trying to settle the odd feeling in his stomach. He had cleaning rounds to complete. A job was still a job, no matter what happened the night before. He pushed his cart out and started with the lower floors. The quiet hallways usually felt comforting to him, but today they felt strangely alive. More faces were turning toward him. More eyes were lingering. It made him nervous. He had spent years learning how to blend into the background, how to do his work quietly without interrupting anyone. But now, people were noticing. He focused on the work. Wiping down the windows, clearing trash bins, cleaning the floors. With each task, he felt himself calming down. Routine had a way of grounding him. But just as he was finishing the last trash bin on the second floor, a voice called out behind him, "Excuse me?" He turned around and saw someone from the HR department walking toward him. The man looked unsure, almost hesitant. "The CEO wants to see you in her office," the HR worker said. The janitor froze. He felt his heart thump once hard. "Now?" he asked. "Yes," she said right away. He nodded slowly. His hands felt heavier than usual. He parked the trash bin neatly, washed his hands quickly, and tried to smooth his shirt. It didn't help much. His clothes were always plain, simple, and a little worn at the edges. As he walked toward the elevator, his heartbeat grew louder. He had never been to the CEO's office. He had cleaned the hallway near it a few times, but always from a distance. The higher floors felt like another world, polished, quiet, filled with people who made big decisions. He stepped into the elevator and watched the numbers rise, each ding making him more aware of how unusual this moment was. When the doors opened, he stepped into a floor covered in soft carpet, where the walls were decorated with framed photos from the company's early years. He walked slowly, unsure if he should knock or wait. The CEO's assistant saw him right away. "You can go in," she said kindly. He nodded, took a deep breath, and opened the office door. The CEO was standing near the large window, her back facing him. She turned slowly at the sound of the door, and he saw the same expression she'd had during his piano performance. Soft, emotional, thoughtful. "Please," she said gently, "come in." He stepped inside, trying not to look overwhelmed. The office was huge, with a view of the whole city. Everything was clean and carefully arranged. It felt like a different universe. The CEO walked toward him with a sincere smile. "I didn't sleep much last night," she said. "I kept thinking about your performance." He looked down shyly. "I'm sorry if I caused any trouble." She shook her head quickly. "No, you didn't cause trouble. You changed the whole evening." He didn't know what to say. She continued quietly. "I had never heard someone play like that." "Not in years," he swallowed. "It was just an old habit." "No," she said firmly. "It was a gift." He felt his hands tighten slightly. He wasn't used to such words. She stepped closer. "Tell me, how did you learn to play like that?" He hesitated. The story wasn't complicated, but it was full of pieces he didn't often share. Still, she looked truly interested. Not curious in a shallow way, interested in a human way. "I started learning when I was young," he said slowly. "My mother used to clean the house of a music teacher. He would let me sit in the corner while he taught others. One day he let me touch the keys, and I never forgot. The CEO listened closely. I didn't have money for lessons, he continued, so I used to watch and listen. I practiced on an old keyboard someone was throwing away. Later, life happened. I stopped playing. Until last night, she said softly. He nodded. There was a long pause. Then the CEO spoke again, more carefully. I want to offer you something. His breath caught. What do you mean? He asked. She took a small step forward. Her eyes were steady. I want you to play again, she said. Not just as a one-time thing. I want to help you share this skill. Maybe here in the company, maybe beyond it. He stared at her, stunned. I'm not sure I understand. She smiled kindly. You don't have to understand yet. Just know that what you did last night touched every person in that room. And it touched me deeply. I want to see where this goes. He felt a tightness in his throat. Too many emotions mixing at once. But I'm just a janitor, he whispered. Not anymore, she replied softly. He looked away for a moment, unsure how to react. Everything inside him felt unsteady hope, fear, disbelief, gratitude. It was too much. I need to think, he said quietly. Of course, she said. Take all the time you need. He nodded, grateful for the space. As he turned to leave, she spoke again in a gentle voice. I don't want you to hide your talent anymore. The words followed him out of the office, sinking deep into him. He rode the elevator down without moving a muscle. He felt like someone had opened a door he didn't even know existed. And now he didn't know whether to walk through it or step back. But one thing was clear. His life was no longer the same. And the days ahead were about to bring changes he couldn't have imagined. The days that followed felt strangely heavy for the janitor. Nothing looked different around him. The hallways were the same. The floors still needed cleaning. The trash bins still filled up each night. But inside, something had shifted. It was like someone had quietly placed a new door inside his life. And now he couldn't stop noticing it. He hadn't opened it yet, but he kept looking at it, wondering what waited on the other side. Every morning when he walked into the building, people greeted him more warmly. Some smiled, some nodded, some even said good morning with a tone that felt almost respectful. A few asked if he really was the one who played the piano at the event. When he admitted it softly, they looked at him with genuine surprise. He didn't know what to do with that attention. He had lived most of his life being invisible. It was safer that way. People couldn't judge what they couldn't see. But now they saw him, and that was new, uncomfortable. Yet somehow, his son also sensed something different. At night, when they sat together eating simple dinners or watching old cartoons, the boy looked at him with curious eyes. He hadn't asked yet, but the janitor knew the questions were building. He kept waiting for the right moment to explain, but the moment never seemed clear. On the third morning after speaking with the CEO, something unexpected happened. As he was cleaning the main lobby, the CEO herself stepped out of the elevator and approached him. He froze for a moment, wiping his hands on a cloth without thinking. She smiled gently. Good morning. He nodded politely. Good morning. I didn't want to pressure you, she said, but I wanted to give you something to think about. She handed him a small folder. Inside were details about a new internal program. The company was launching one that supported employees who wanted to develop creative skills. There were options for music workshops, company-sponsored performances, and ways to teach others. He stared at the papers, overwhelmed. I know this is all sudden, she continued softly, but I want you to picture a different path for yourself. Not instead of who you are, but in addition to it. You can keep your job, or you can explore something new. The choice is yours." He swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can do something like this." "You already proved you can," she said. "All I'm asking is that you don't hide from your own potential." He didn't know how to respond. Words didn't come easily when his heart was full. She didn't stay long. She simply gave him a warm nod and walked away, leaving him standing there with the folder in his hands. He opened it again. The letters blurred slightly, not because he didn't understand them, but because he felt something rising inside him. A mixture of fear and hope was the part he didn't trust. That evening, after picking up his son and walking home through the fading sunlight, he kept thinking about the folder. The boy chatted about school, a funny story about his classmate, and an upcoming art project he was excited about. The father listened carefully, smiling when he needed to, but his mind drifted again and again. Once they were home, the boy finally asked, "Is something happening at work?" The janitor paused as he placed dishes in the sink. "What makes you say that?" "You're acting different." The boy shrugged. "Not bad different. Just thinking a lot." He dried his hands and sat down. Across from him, "There's something I need to tell you," he said softly. The boy's eyes widened a little, but he stayed quiet. "You know how there was a big event at work the other day?" The boy nodded. "They asked me to play the piano there." The boy blinked. "You played? In front of everyone?" He nodded gently. The boy's mouth fell open. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to make a big deal," he said. "And I didn't know if it was even real." The boy stared at him with something like amazement. "You always play so good," the boy said quietly. "You should play for people. You should show them." The words hit the janitor harder than he expected. He hadn't even played much at home lately, not seriously. Not like before. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you really think that?" The boy nodded with certainty. "Yeah, I wish people knew how good you are." The janitor looked away, trying to steady his emotions. Hearing that from his son meant more than anything the CEO had said. That night, after his son went to sleep, he sat on the couch with the small keyboard he kept carefully stored under the bed. It wasn't nearly as nice as the piano he played at the event, but it still worked. His fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment before he finally pressed down. A soft sound filled the room. He played slowly at first, letting memories guide him. Each note carried something from the past, old joys, lost dreams, quiet promises he had made to himself long ago. As he continued, the room seemed to shrink into silence. He didn't play for long, but when he stopped, he felt calmer, clearer. The next morning, he walked into work with the folder tucked inside his bag. He didn't plan to show it to anyone yet, but holding it felt like holding a question he needed to answer. All day, he worked quietly, lost in thought. He imagined what it would feel like to play again, not just alone at night, but in front of people. To teach others. To share something he had kept hidden for so many years. Not the idea frightened him, but the idea also warmed something inside his chest. Late that afternoon, he was cleaning the hallway near the meeting rooms when he heard music coming from one of the doors. Someone was playing a simple tune on a portable piano the staff sometimes used for short breaks. It wasn't anything advanced, but the notes echoed softly. At first he walked past, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, made him pause. He peeked inside. A young intern was sitting at the keyboard, pressing the keys timidly. She noticed him and looked embarrassed. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know anyone was nearby." He smiled kindly. "You're doing fine." She shook her head. "Not really. I'm just trying to learn, but I don't think I'm very good." He hesitated, then took a small step inside. "Would you like some help?" he asked quietly. Her eyes widened. "You know how to play?" He nodded gently. She moved aside, letting him sit. He showed her a few small finger placements, how to relax her hands, how to press the keys gently instead of stiffly. She watched carefully, copying him. Within minutes, she was playing more smoothly. She looked at him in surprise. That actually helped a lot. He smiled. Sometimes you just need to trust your hands. When he stood up to leave, she said, "You should teach people. You're really good at explaining." The words followed him down the hall. Later, as he moved his cart toward the storage room, he passed the CEO by accident. She was walking with 2 board members, but paused when she saw him. "Did you think about what we discussed?" she asked. He held the folder tightly. "I did," he said quietly. "And?" He took a deep breath. "I don't know everything yet," he said truthfully. "But I think I want to try." Her face lit up with a warm, genuine smile. "That's all I hoped for." He felt his heart thump, not with fear this time, but with something much lighter. As he walked away, he realized something important. He wasn't just opening a new door. He was stepping through it. And for the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't walking alone. The following weeks became a slow but steady wave of change, though nothing dramatic happened all at once. Instead, life moved in quiet steps, each one nudging the janitor forward, whether he was ready or not. At first, he still woke before dawn and still prepared breakfast the same simple way. He still dropped his son off at school and walked into the tall building with his head slightly lowered. But inside, a calm confidence was building, small, fragile, but growing. After agreeing to try the program the CEO had offered, he was invited to a short meeting with the company's creative team. They wanted to understand his comfort level before giving him any responsibilities. He walked into the room nervously, prepared to feel out of place, but the moment he sat down, he realized something surprising. They weren't looking at him with judgment. They were looking at him with curiosity, respect, and a strange kind of admiration. The team leader, a gentle man with tired eyes and a calm voice, asked him simple questions: how long he had played, what kind of music he enjoyed, how comfortable he felt teaching others. The janitor answered honestly, admitting where he felt unsure, but every time he expressed a doubt, the team leader nodded reassuringly. "You don't have to be perfect," he said, "just willing." And he was. So the company arranged something. Small at first, a lunchtime music session in one of the open rooms. Nothing fancy, no stage, just a keyboard set up near the windows. People could come and go as they pleased. When the day arrived, he felt nerves twist in his stomach. He cleaned the early floors quickly, then went upstairs to wash his hands and change into a clean shirt he had ironed the night before. His son's voice echoed in his mind. You should show people. He wanted to. But wanting didn't erase fear. When he stepped into the room, only a handful of employees were there. A few interns, an HR worker, a receptionist who always smiled politely. He nodded to them nervously, then sat at the keyboard. For a long moment, he simply rested his fingers on the keys. Then he began to play. The sound filled the room softly at first, gentle but warm. He didn't choose anything overly complex, just a calm, flowing tune he had always played for his son when he was younger. Something simple, something honest, something true. People drifted in as the minutes passed. Some stopped at the doorway. Some sat down. Some closed their eyes to listen. He didn't look up often, afraid that meeting their eyes would make his hands shake. But when he finally did, he saw something that almost made him lose his breath. People were smiling. Not polite smiles, real ones. Soft, genuine, touch. And the room was full. When he finished, the applause startled him. It wasn't loud or wild, but it was sincere, warm enough to make his face flush slightly. He stood slowly, not knowing what to do, But the team leader approached and patted his shoulder. "That was wonderful," he said. "Would you be willing to do another session next month?" He hesitated, then nodded. Double quotes, "Yes," he said quietly. When the room finally emptied, the CEO appeared at the doorway. She had watched the entire thing without him realizing. "You've grown already," she said. He shook his head. "I was nervous the whole time." "Nervous," she said, smiling, "but brave." Her words stayed with him the rest of the day. In the evenings, his son asked for details, listening with wide, proud eyes. When the janitor mentioned that people had clapped, the boy's face lit up in excitement. "That's amazing," he said. "I wish I was there." "You will be," the father replied softly. "Someday." Over the next few weeks, things continued to shift. The janitor found himself teaching small lessons to employees who wanted to learn basic piano. It started with the intern he had helped before, then others joined after hearing about it. He didn't charge money, he didn't even know how to, but it felt good to help. He discovered that teaching wasn't about being flawless. It was about being patient, understanding, and willing to guide others gently. And he had spent his whole life surviving quietly, observing, learning. Those skills now became strengths. Some evenings after work ended, he spent time in the empty meeting rooms practicing. The company left a keyboard there just for him. It wasn't a grand piano, but it was enough. When the sun set outside the wide windows, he played softly, letting the music spill into the quiet rooms. He found pieces of himself that he had lost years ago. The CEO occasionally visited, never staying long, always listening silently. She never interrupted, never pressured. She simply watched, as if reminding him that someone believed in him without conditions. One night, she approached him after he finished. "There's something I want to ask you," she said. He turned, wiping his hands nervously. "There's an upcoming charity event," she continued. "Very important. We want someone to perform at the opening. Someone who can connect with people on a deeper level." He blinked slowly. "You want me?" "Yes," she said simply. His heart stuttered. Performing in front of coworkers was one thing, but an event? Something public? Something formal? He hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready." She nodded. "I understand. Take your time. Think about it." He went home that night filled with uncertainty. His son noticed right away. "Dad, what's wrong?" He explained the situation, trying to sound calm, but his voice wavered slightly. His son didn't hesitate. "You can do it," the boy said. "I know you can. You're not the same as before." The janitor looked at him quietly. "Do you really believe that?" "Yes," the boy said with a small smile. "You're happier now. And when you play, it feels big. Like something inside you wakes up." Those words sank into him, warm and steady. He didn't answer right away. But the next morning, as he walked into the company building, he felt a different kind of calm inside him. Something centered. Something ready. He asked the CEO's assistant if he could speak to her. Within minutes, he was in her office. She looked up, patient and hopeful. "I'll do it," he said. Her expression softened into a relieved smile. "Good," she said. "You won't regret it." The following days became a mix of nerves and excitement. The company arranged extra practice time for him and set up a real piano in one of the open rooms. When he first sat in front of the polished instrument, his breath caught. It reminded him of the piano he had played as a boy, the one he used to sneak touches of whenever the music teacher wasn't looking. He played for hours each day, polishing his technique, exploring melodies that felt honest. Some nights he stayed, so late that the security guard gently reminded him to go home. Finally, tea.